There's something unsettling about a sound that you can't place. It's not loud enough to be obvious. It's not clear enough to follow. It's just there. Some people might describe it as a low vibration, something that you feel more than you hear. Others hear something entirely different, something metallic, something distant, almost like it's coming from above. In one city, thousands of people reported the same sound for years. It rattled windows, disrupted sleep, and became part of daily life. And then one day, it stopped. In other places, similar sounds still appear. Recorded, shared, never fully explained. Tonight, on the Midnight Drive, we're sitting with sounds that don't have a clear source, and what it feels like when something is present, but just out of reach. There's a certain kind of sound that doesn't behave the way sound is supposed to. You don't hear it clearly. You don't know where it's coming from. And after a while, you're not even sure if you're listening or if you're feeling it. That's how people described it. Not loud in the way you would expect, not sharp, not sudden. It was just constant. A low, steady vibration that seemed to sit underneath everything else. People in Windsor, Ontario, started noticing it around 2011. At first, it was easy to ignore. Something in the background. Something you assume has a normal explanation. Maybe it's a truck idling somewhere, or machinery running in the distance. But it didn't go away. It would come and go, sometimes lasting for hours. Sometimes stretching across entire nights. And when it was there, it was difficult to escape. You could go outside. It's still there. You could move to a different room. It's still there. You could lie down and try to sleep, but then you would feel it through the bed frame, through the walls, through your chest. Some people described it as a hum. Others said it felt more like a pressure. Like something vibrating just below the threshold of hearing, around 30 to 40 hertz. Right at the edge of what the human ear can detect. Low enough for that some people it wasn't even a sound at all. It was more of a sensation. Windows would rattle. Pictures on the wall would shift slightly out of place. And for people sensitive to it, the effects went further. Headaches, nausea, a kind of low-level anxiety that didn't have a clear cause. Sleep became difficult, not because of noise exactly, but because of presence. That feeling that something is there, even when you can't point to it. As more people started talking about it, it became clear this wasn't isolated. Entire neighborhoods were experiencing the same thing. West Windsor, LaSalle, areas closest to the Detroit River. At one point, more than 22,000 people reported the sound in a single evening. That's a significant number because it moves the experience out of the category of something subjective and into something shared. People began comparing notes, trying to find patterns. There were online groups that were dedicated to tracking when it happened, what it sounds like, how long it lasted. Everyone had a slightly different description, but its structure was the same. Low, constant, hard to locate. And over time, the question shifted from, is this real? To, what is this? Researchers got involved. The Canadian government commissioned studies. Teams set up monitoring equipment, seismic sensors, audio recording stations. They were able to confirm something important. The sound existed. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't just one person or a small group. It was real. There was measurable energy moving through the environment. But confirming that didn't solve the problem, because knowing something is there is not the same as knowing where it's coming from. The leading theory pointed across the river to an industrial area known as Zug Island, a man-made island in the Detroit River, home to heavy industry, including a U.S. steel facility. From a distance, it made sense. Large-scale industrial operations can produce low-frequency vibrations, the kind that travel farther than you would expect, the kind that don't behave like normal sound. But there was a problem. The researchers couldn't access the site, as it was on U.S. territory, privately controlled, which meant the people studying the hum could measure it, track its direction, even narrow down its most likely source, but they couldn't stand where it was happening. One researcher described the process as trying to chase something that you can't quite catch. You know it's there. You can see the effect that it has, but you can't get close enough to confirm it directly. That gap created space for other explanations. Some people leaned toward industrial causes. Others weren't so sure. There were theories about military activity, underground construction, even more speculative ideas that tried to explain why something so persistent could feel so hidden. But most of those didn't hold up under scrutiny. The simplest explanation stayed in place. Something mechanical, something large, something producing a consistent low-frequency output. And still, for years, nothing changed. The hum continued. People adjusted where they could. Some moved. Others tried to ignore it. But once you notice something like that, it's hard to stop noticing it. Especially when it shows up at night, when everything else is quiet. There's nothing to mask it. And then, after nearly a decade, something shifted. Not gradually, not through a public announcement or clear resolution. The sound just stopped. Around the same time, operations at the steel plant on Zug Island began to wind down. Blast furnaces were idled, activity slowed, and without that constant industrial output, the hum disappeared. Reports dropped off, complaints stopped. The thing that had been present for years was suddenly gone, which in a way confirmed the explanation. Not through direct access, not through a final definitive statement, but through absence. Remove the source, and the effect disappears. There's something satisfying about that, isn't there? A clean line between cause and outcome. A mystery that turns into something understandable. For Windsor, that story has an ending. The sound came from somewhere, it had a source, and eventually it stopped. But not every sound follows that pattern. Not everything that people hear can be traced that cleanly. And in some cases, the sound doesn't come from somewhere you can point to at all. Have you ever heard a sound that you couldn't trace where its origin was? Let us know in the comments below or reach out to us and leave us a voicemail at the Midnight Drive, 402-610-2836. Tonight on the Midnight Drive, we're talking about sounds that don't have clear and traceable origin points. See, there's a different kind of sound that shows up in a very different way from what we were talking about from the Windsor Hum. It's not a constant sound. It's not something that settles into the background. This one actually arrives quite suddenly, without warning, and just as quickly, it's gone. People usually notice it the same way. They're outside or near a window, doing something ordinary, and then something cuts through the air. A sound that doesn't match anything around them. It's not a plane. It's not thunder. Nor is it machinery that they recognize. It's something metallic. It's something resonant. It's almost structured. Like a tone that's being held out rather than a noise that's being made. Some people describe it as a trumpet. Others say it sounds like grinding metal. Or something massive shifting somewhere that's just out of sight. But the detail that shows up again and again is this. It feels like it's coming from above. Not from a direction that you can walk toward, not from a source that you can trace, it's just overhead. And when people look up, there's nothing there. No aircraft, no visible disturbance, just open sky. That's part of what gives the experience its shape. It's the disconnect between what you're hearing and what you're seeing. Because with most sounds, even if you don't immediately know what caused them, you can narrow it down. You can point. You can say, it's probably coming from over there. With this, that instinct doesn't work. The sound doesn't anchor itself. It doesn't behave like it's something tied to a place. That's how these recordings started to spread. People standing in driveways and parking lots and open fields, holding up their phones and capturing something that feels like it definitely should have a visible source. But it doesn't. As more of these clips appeared, they started getting grouped together under a name. Sky trumpets. It's not a scientific term, it's just a way to describe the sound. And like most things that get named that way, it sits somewhere between observation and interpretation. Because the sound itself is real. People have recorded it. They experienced it. But what it is less clear. Reports have come from all over the world. North America, Europe, Australia, parts of Asia. Different environments, different climates, different conditions. And still, the descriptions line up in a way that feels familiar. That consistency is what makes it difficult to dismiss entirely. At the same time, it's also what makes it difficult to confirm as a single phenomena. Because when something shows up in multiple places in slightly different forms, it raises another possibility. That we're grouping together things that aren't actually the same. That similar sounds from different sources are being interpreted through the same lens. There are scientific explanations that account for parts of this. Atmospheric conditions can bend sound in unexpected ways. Temperature inversions can carry low-frequency noise over long distances, turning something far away into something that feels close. Industrial activity can produce tones that resonate under the right conditions. Meteors entering the atmosphere can create sonic booms. Certain geological shifts can generate sound without obvious ground movement. All of those are real. All of them have been documented. But none of them explain every case. And that's where the uncertainty stays. not because there's no explanation at all, but because there isn't one explanation that fits everything. There's also another layer that complicates things: the way these sounds are shared. Most people don't experience them directly. They encounter them through videos, clips that have been recorded, uploaded, and passed around. And once something enters that space, it changes. Audio gets compressed, distorted, sometimes even edited. In some cases, the same sound has been used across multiple videos, placed over different footage, which makes it hard to separate what's real and what's not. That doesn't mean all of it's fabricated, it just means the signal is mixed. Real recordings, misidentified sounds, edited clips, all sitting next to each other, presented in the same way. And when that happens, the experience becomes less about a single event and more about a pattern of interpretation. What people think they're hearing, what they expect to hear, and what they've already seen before. There's a long history of sounds like this, long before recording equipment, long before the internet, accounts of loud, distant booms that didn't match the sky, descriptions of cannon-like sounds over lakes, or thunder without storms. A sound that doesn't have an obvious source. And like with sleep paralysis, those experiences often take on meaning based on context. In some places, they're tied to natural explanations. In others, they're connected to something more symbolic, something intentional. But even without that layer, there's something about the experience itself that holds attention, because it interrupts expectation. It breaks the normal relationship between cause and effect. You hear something, but you can't find it. You look up, and there's nothing there. That gap is where the feeling comes from. And unlike the Windsor Hum, there isn't a clean resolution to move toward. No single source that once removed makes everything stop. No moment where the explanation settles into something stable. Instead, each instance stands on its own. A sound, a recording, a report, and then silence. Until the next one. That doesn't mean there's something unexplainable happening, it just means the explanation isn't always available in the moment. Or it isn't simple. Or it doesn't carry the same weight as the experience itself. Because even when you understand how sound can travel, how the atmosphere can shift it, how distance can distort it, that doesn't always change how it feels when you hear it. Standing outside, looking up, hearing something that seems like it should be coming from somewhere, and realizing you have no way to follow it. Some sounds can be traced, measured, explained. You can walk them back to their source. You can stand where they're coming from. And once you do, the experience changes. It becomes something you understand, something you can place. And then there are sounds like this that appear, that linger just long enough to be noticed and then disappear again, leaving behind a recording, a memory, and a question that doesn't quite settle. Not everything we hear comes with clear direction, and not everything real can be located.